the summative is going to have 22 total questions, but it's going to be worth 50 points. This study guide is very specific with the kinds of questions that you're going to see. So we're going to go through each of these. An inequality. What is an inequality? Nice. It is a math sentence or a statement where two quantities or more, if it's compound, are not necessarily equal. They're related to each other by greater than or less than, greater than or equal to, etc. An example would be something like 2x plus 5 is less than 15. That's an inequality statement. The solution of an inequality is the range of numbers or the group of numbers or the set of numbers is probably a better word. The set of numbers that make an inequality true. We call this satisfying the inequality. When something satisfies the inequality, it means that it makes it true. For example, in the example above, 2x plus 5 is less than 15. If you were to solve this inequality, you would subtract 5. You would get 2x is less than 10, so x is less than 5. Anything that's less than 5 is a solution to the inequality. 0, -2, -4, 4.99, repeating, anything less than 5, not including 5. A compound inequality, just like compound sentences or two or more sentences joined by and, or, and other words, a compound inequality is two inequalities in one statement. They use the word or and. For example, if I wanted to make a simple inequality such as x is greater than 5 or x is less than -2. Another one may be x is greater than 5 and it's less than 2, where that's an and inequality brought together as one. An intersection. Can you all remember what an intersection is in reference to a compound inequality? An intersection is the group of solutions or the group of numbers that are in common with and inequalities. So if I was to, for example, graph the one above, the 2, 5, this here is the intersection, the shaded part. Contrary with a union is the set of numbers or the set of solutions or whatever word you want to use in that sense that satisfy or graph an or inequality. So if I was to graph the first example, the greater than 5 or less than -2, that graph would be considered the union. So one way to make sure you don't confuse between union and intersection, think of intersect as actually crossing over together. In between, intersect. As opposed to union is just they're occurring at the same time in unity, but they are not necessarily dependent on one another. If you have just one of the answers, it would still satisfy it. Okay. Solutions of the inequality. They want you to write the inequality that this graph is of. So the solution of this guy, it's an open circle, so we know it does not have the or equal to. We know that it's going to the left, which means it's less than, so it would be x is less than -1. Remember, you always want to put the letter first because the letter in standard form, when the letter is first, then the direction of the arrow is the direction of the symbol. Solve the inequality. We're dealing with decimals, that's all right. Please remember that when you add and subtract decimals, you need to line it up. And also, very important for you guys is, remember, I am testing on the process. So bring your calculators so that you can deal with fractions and decimals. If you don't bring a calculator, you're welcome to use the ones in the back. So you're not going to make arithmetic errors necessarily unless you're careless with the calculator. In this case, you're going to subtract a half, and you get 9.3 is less than x, which in standard form is that x is greater than 9.3. Set builder notation, remember, squiggly, x such that x is greater than 9.3. I will not mark it wrong if you don't put it in set builder notation if you forget, but try to remember because I want you to make sure that you understand this form. 9.3, well, I don't know, we can say that this is 9, this is 9.1, 9.2, this is 9.3, so it's open circle, greater than.
You can't just randomly write.
You can, I don't mind if you put 9.3.
I put 9.3 and then negative 9.3.
Perfect, that's absolutely fine. You could put negative 9.3 on the other side, so I see that you know positives and negatives. Okay, the next one. The next number 8, in order to solve, I'm going to have to divide by a negative, which means you have to remember to flip the symbol. So you get x is less than or equal to negative 5. And then to graph this one, you're going to go to your number line, bless you. And you can say if this is negative 5, this is 0, and this is 5, it's closed circle, shaded to the left. And in set builder notation, x such that x is less than or equal to negative 5. Number 9, we are dividing by negative 12. So to undo, you're going to multiply by negative 12. So you multiply by negative 12, and you get y. Don't forget to flip the sign because you multiplied by a negative. When you multiply these two, you get negative 10. And then when you go to graph it, it's going to be an open circle on negative 10. And if this is 0 and this is 10, open circle shaded to the left. Set builder x, or actually y, because it's not x, so y such that y is less than negative 10. Okay, for this one, remember you have to undo this division before you get rid of that minus 9. So you're going to multiply by 3 on both sides. That's going to leave you with negative 9 plus 2x is greater than negative 15. Then you're going to add 9 to both sides, and you're going to get 2x is greater than negative 6. Divide by 2, and you get x is greater than negative 3. Set builder, squiggly x bar. X is greater than negative 3 and squiggly. Here is negative 3, this is 0. This is 3, it's an open circle, and it's shaded to the left. On the summative for this year, I want to make sure that you guys understand this. Please try to write the answer in this set builder notation. Even on the test, it'll say set builder notation under the blank so that it reminds you to write it that way.
Oh, so this will look.
So it'll remind you to write it that way so that you recall that you know how to write it. If in the process of solving you are so into the test that you forget to write it this way, I would not mark it wrong. But I want you to get used to writing in set builder notation because that is the way that algebraic solutions should be written. I am going to be looking for the open circle, the number is correct, the direction of the shading, and the answer. So that's 4 points right there. Okay? 1 for the answer, that it's correct, as in the number, the value, negative 3. 1 for the open circle, that's 2. 1 for the direction of the shading, that's 3. And 1 for writing the solution is 4. So I have negative 5 minus 3x is greater than or equal to. We take the 2 and we distribute it. 20 plus 4x, rewrite that plus 3. I can combine the 20 and the 3 on this side. So I really get 23 plus 4x. Rewrite everything else. Now what I need to do is bring things over. I like to keep the x positive, so I'm going to add the 3x so that it can become positive on the right-hand side. You get 7x plus 23 is less than or equal to negative 5. Then I'm going to minus 23 on both sides, and I get negative 28 greater than or equal to 7x. So with this one, we're going to divide by 7, and you get negative 4 is greater than or equal to x, which is really x is less than or equal to negative 4.
Line.
Brace x line. X is less than or equal to negative 4.
Brace.
Brace. Here's the negative 4. Here's the 0. Here's the 4. I have a closed circle, and I'm shading to the left because it's less than negative 4. So we don't like the idea of fractions. We don't like them because they are just funky. At this point, you should be able to write it out and do it. But I really want to make sure you understand, because you will have the tool of a calculator. I want to make sure you understand how to use your calculator with fractions. And not only that, you're going to have it for the SATs and for all other high school stuff. So please watch as I'm showing you how to use a calculator so that all you have to do is punch in the fraction and it does the answer. So first of all, I'm going to do this part here, which is pretty simple. 12x minus 3 greater than. Now I need to multiply 2. Okay, so 2/3, what you're going to do is you're going to put in 2 over 3, that's what that little button there does. It makes it a fraction. Times 3 equals, and it gives you the value of 2, which hopefully you were able to do in your head, but if not, that's fine. So this is really 2x plus 2/3 times 9. 2 over 3 times 9 equals 6. And then you're going to continue. Yes. And then you do plus 10x and then minus 9. So let's finish this one first. 2x and 10x is 12x. 6 minus 9 is negative 3. And rewrite everything else. Now, 12x minus 3. Can that be greater than 12x minus 3?
No.
Why not?
Because it would be because it's the same, so it would have to have the underline.
Exactly, or equal. It says 12x minus 3 is greater than 12x
So
minus
no
3. It's
solution.
kind of like saying 5 is greater than itself. It's not. It's equal to. So you're right. It's no solution. No solution because it's a false statement. False equals no solution. If it had the or equal to, then it would be all reals. But it does not have the all equal to. How can 12x minus 3 be greater than itself? So the way that you would graph this one, because it's no solution, is you would put a 0 with a line through it. That is no solution. Okay? The reason we do that is because if you leave it blank, it appears as if you overlooked the fact that you have to think about the graph. So since there's no solution, you literally put a little 0 with a bar. We're going to combine the 2 and the negative 9. So that's going to be negative 3x minus 7. 2 minus 9 is negative 7. Continue. Then you can add 3x. Now remember, so Ava just pointed out that she started by bringing that minus 3x over first before she combined the 2 and the negative 9, which is absolutely appropriate because you're using the commutative property. You're adding. And when you're adding, you can add in different order as long as you always take the sign in front. So then we get 7x minus 4 is greater than negative 7. Add 4 to both sides. 7x is greater than negative 3. What do I have to do now?
Divide.
Divide by 7. And you get a fraction. X is greater than negative 3/7. Remember that fractions are numbers too, so there's no discrimination against fractions. We treat them the same because they're numbers, and so we continue to answer them as the answer. Number 14, make sure that we're able to look at these words. So we're going to have to translate words into inequalities. So please make sure you understand some of the words that you need to know. So before we begin on those, I want to, well, we'll get to those at the end. Let's look at this one. We forgot to graph this one. I apologize. X is greater than negative 3/7. So if this is 0 and this is negative 3/7, we know that if we counted in terms of sevens, we'd be like 1 7, 2 7s, 3 7s, 4, 5, 6, 7. Negative 3/7 would be here. I am not going to be a stickler on where you're putting your numbers, as long as you know that if that was negative 3/7, if this was 0, 3/7 would be equally distant from 0.
You have to count by 3.
It's an open circle. Greater than means it shades to the right.
I just put it in a random spot.
Now we can get to the word problem. An elevator can hold less than 2,800 pounds. Does that mean that I can hold 2,800 pounds? No, it's less than. So you,
709.
right, etc. So you would say, I know the elevator can hold less than 2,800 pounds. Write and solve an inequality to determine how much additional weight it can hold if it currently holds 2,375. Well, I know that if I currently have 2,375, that plus the extra weight has to still be less than 2,800. And then you solve it by subtracting. And when you subtract,
Make a movie with
4, you get X is less than 425 pounds. But please make sure you could write this inequality from the beginning. You have 2,375, you're adding an unknown quantity and still have to be less than 2,800. This one would be worth a couple points because it would be points for correctly writing the original inequality, points for correctly solving it. So notice here there's 2 blanks. That's the same as on the test. The written inequality is that whatever amount you're going to have to add to the one that you already have has to still be less than 2,800. And the final solved inequality is X has to be less than 425.
Hold on, wait, can you keep that up for a little bit?
The sum of, or I'm sorry, 2 times the sum of X and 3
Can I
is
do it?
at most 17. That
Oh, wait.
recorded. So it is, you're right, 2 times the sum of X and 3 means you're multiplying 2 not just to X but to the entire X plus 3. So you guys have to make sure you have parentheses on that. And if it says at most, it means that you can't be anything more than 17. So when we get stuck on these words, you got to think to yourself, if I can be at most 17, then it means that I cannot be anything more than 17, because that's the most you can be. And if that's the case, that means you're less than or equal to 17. And then, go ahead and solve it.
And you do, so then it's 2x
Mm.
plus 6, or 3, plus 6 is greater than or equal to.
Less than or equal to.
Less than or equal to 17.
Yeah, and then we
Then you do
minus 6.
minus 6 from 17.
Uh-huh.
And then it's 2x
Is less than or
is
equal
less
to.
than or equal to 9.
Yep.
And then you divide by 2.
Then you divide by 2.
And then it's 9 over 2.
X is less than or equal to 9/2. You could leave it like that. You do not need to say 4.5 or 4.5. So the written inequality would be 2 times the sum of X and 3, less than or equal to 17, and the final solved solution answer would be this. Okay, compound inequality. Just by looking at this compound inequality, what kind of an inequality is this?
And.
It's an and.
Does the plus.
Now with this one, you notice that there's an inequality symbol here and here, but there's only a variable in the middle, correct?
Correct.
So you could solve it within one inequality instead of having to break it up into the two. The inequality, if you're solving this one, you're going to try to get x alone, so you're going to minus 3 from everything. Negative 5 minus 3 is negative 8 is less than or equal to 2x, which is less than 6. Does everybody see that?
Yeah.
And then what am I going to do?
You're gonna subtract 6 from each.
Divide everything by 2. That gives me negative 4 is less than or equal to x, which is less than 3. Pay close attention to the fact that you have an inequality that has an or equal to and one that does not. So you've got to be careful not to just put both of them with the same type of circle,
+4.
right? To graph this one, first of all, set builder notation, so it would be open x such that, and then you just write the whole inequality. Negative 4 is less than or equal x less than 3,
Oh, we don't do
close.
anything with it?
So to graph this one, I would make sure that I properly put negative 4 on the left-hand side because it is smallest. So let's say negative 4 is here. That's negative 4, and this is 0. 3 is here. Make sure you properly have spaces in this case. The two inequalities that you have, and don't let this set builder notation, the way it's written, screw with your head. Because when I look at that just now, I immediately think that, wait, that doesn't look right. Refer back to the original one. You're literally between negative 4 and 3. So you're going to have a closed circle on negative 4, an open on 3, and it's an and, so you shade in between. Okay, so number 17, it's an or. We're going to treat them independently. I'm going to add 4 to both sides, and I get x is greater than 5. Or, add 4 to both sides, x is less than 1. So I have the inequalities. Now I'm going to graph it. X is greater than 5, and x is greater than 1. So if this is 0, 1 is here, 2, 3, 4, 5 is here. X is less than 1, or x is greater than 5, and a set builder, x such that x is greater than 5, or x is less than 1. Okay, so for number 18, with the compound inequality, you notice that this is an and inequality. And I know it's an and inequality because there's two inequality symbols and there's no word or. Now remember that in order to solve these, you can do it all at once in one equation or inequality, or you could break it up into the two inequalities. We would add 3 to everything. And negative 2 plus 3 is 1. Rewrite the less than. X, which is less than 8. Now to graph this, you know that you're going to have open circles because it's not or equal to. If this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and this is 8, we're going to have an open circle on 1. You're also going to have an open circle on 8. And because it's a less than and inequality, you shade in between. As a quick reminder, that part right there, which is shaded in between, is called an intersection. Now, the set builder notation, and you remember I'm going to leave it up on the whiteboard so that you can actually refer to it during the test, and you'll get used to writing it that way. Set builder notation just basically is a way of saying this is the answer. And you go open squiggly, which means the set of numbers where x is the variable, such that, and then you write your inequality. Close, and you're done. And that is how you would write set builder notation for that answer right there. Okay, number 19. Number 19 is also a compound inequality, but it's an or. So you treat each inequality separately. You add 1 to both sides.
Yeah. And then it's 4x is greater than
Less than
less than,
16.
my bad, 16, or
You get x is less than 4, or, and then you go to the next one,
you divide by 8 by both sides.
and you get x is greater than or equal to 6. So your solutions, because it's an or, are going to be treated independently. It's either one or the other. The way that, and this one got a little messed up when I was moving it, the way that you would graph it, is make sure that you remember that you have to make sure they're arranged from least to greatest, otherwise your number line is going to be messed up. The 4 is here, the 6 is here, less than 4, so it's what kind of a circle?
It's well, the 4 is gonna be an open, and the 6 is gonna be shaded.
And which direction do you shade the 4?
So you shade the 4 to the left,
And the 6?
to the right.
That is your solution graphed. Set builder notation, the values of x such that x is less than 4 or x is greater than or equal to 6. And that's your solution set. Okay. Now, before you get all worked up because it's a word problem, just imagine what it's saying before you even think about starting it. The ball used in a soccer game may not weigh more than, okay, so you know that it cannot be more than 16 ounces or less than 14. Write a compound inequality. Okay, well, the ball, let's say B is for soccer ball, and the ball cannot be more than 16 ounces. If you cannot be more than 16, what does it mean you have to be? Less than or equal to 16.
Or 16.
Or, and I know it's an or because look at that. There's an or right there. You cannot be, and we're talking about B for the soccer ball, you cannot be less than 14. If you cannot be less than 14, what does it mean you have to be? If you cannot be, you may not. You may not.
Oh, you have to be higher. Or
That means you have to be greater than 14.
okay. Wait, or less.
And in reality, it's really greater than or equal to 14. Because if you're not allowed to weigh less than 14, it means you're allowed to be 14 or anything more. Because you're not allowed to be less than 14. And that's the compound inequality. You notice that there's no set builder notation in this. It was just translating the real world problem into a compound inequality. The last two questions are going to ask you to write solutions. Now, remember that a solution is the answers to an inequality that would, quote, satisfy the inequality or make it true. Here they show you visually the solutions, and they want you to tell me what the compound solution inequalities would be. Well, first of all, you can look at the numbers that they're referring to. What are the numbers they're referring to?
Negative 1 and 2.
Negative 1 and 2. Break it up one by one. Let's just look at the negative 1. We know that the answer must be what in reference to negative 1? Less than negative 1. Your x must be less than negative 1. What kind of an inequality is this? An and or an or? Or, because it goes either or. And what about the other one? What about 2? In reference to 2, you must be greater than 2. X must be greater than 2. Now, if you used a different letter, that's fine. It doesn't matter what letter you use because a variable is a variable. On the summative, it'll ask you if it wants you to write it in set builder notation, just like the questions in the previous questions, where it says blank and underneath set builder notation, it'll say that. This is completely acceptable as it is. Okay, number 22. Is this an and inequality or an or? And you know that it's an and because it's shaded in between, correct? One of my numbers is going to be open circle. One of them is closed. Now remember, you are basically saying that the values of the variable, let's say x again, have to be between these two numbers. Do you see how that tells you right here, this inequality, just by looking at it? You know it's an and, but it's telling you that your numbers, your values, have to be between these two values. Do you see that? Your value is between here. You're physically going to write that. Your value of x is between 5 and 9. And remember, and is a less than. Open circle on 5, so it's less than, not with an underline. And then another less than symbol, because it's a less than. But now this guy has a closed circle, so it's or equal to.